There are so many things as humans that we don't really understand. There are mystic, magical, fated things, as well as otherworldly realms that we just can't comprehend unless it's through the journey of our own soul. I'm your host, Steffi, aka the Spirit Sis. I'm a psychic medium, astrologer, and intuition teacher, and I'm here to take you on an exploration of all things spiritual. I'm going to connect to Source, give you divine downloads, and I want to keep you in the spirit loop. So here is the Psychic Scoop. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Psychic Scoop Podcast. I'm your host, Steffi, aka Spirit Sis. I'm an evidential psychic medium and professional astrologer. Today, I'm joined by another psychic, Dr. Matt Turner, certified doctor of metaphysical healing and an ordained minister in the Church of Wisdom. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Same. Okay. Before we started recording, I'm like, Dr. Matt Turner. And you're like, that's too formal. But like, what? Okay. So what makes you a doctor?
Yeah. So the school that I went to, it's called Delphi University. It's up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's very much like a witchy metaphysical. Actually, I always call it a mystery school on earth. So if you're looking for that kind of vibe, highly recommend it. So they have this like doctorate of metaphysical healing program. And there's a lot of stuff that led me to that, which I'm happy to share if you want me to go into detail.
Yes.
But once I found my way there, I just knew that I had to do the whole thing. And it's very much things that I was in alignment with. And then, so I went through their whole, certificate program, like for a year I was there. So it was very in-depth.
Wow. And you were staying there the whole time.
Yep.
Like
I had like a few breaks in between, when I could leave and then I'd come back.
Wow. You really dove into that, which is
Oh,
amazing.
literally. Yeah, it was a
And you always had like psychic gifts your whole life. So
You
what
know,
kind of got you to that point?
it's so interesting because when I was 15, I moved from Georgia to Kansas City to live with my aunt and uncle that lived in Kansas City. And they were like the witchy ones in the family. And before that, like I didn't really know anything about that whole world. I grew up Southern Baptist and that was the world I knew, but I was like, something don't feel right. But I couldn't explain what that was. And so then I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and they started taking me to see psychics and healers. And all these psychics are always telling me I'm psychic and I'm a healer and I'm all these things. And I'm like this little old shy boy. And I'm like, no, I can't be any of that. Y'all are lying to me. But I literally for years just kept hearing the same message. And then when and I did not think I'd always been psychic. No one could convince me. And because I didn't necessarily like see spirits and stuff like that as a kid, but I was at Delphi, like at school, and we were like doing some classes on channeling, developing psychic gifts and stuff. And I realized that like claircognizance, like direct knowing, like was my main gift that had always been there.
Whoa.
And so I then realized like I always had these moments as a kid where I'd say things to people and they were like, I don't think so. And I'm like, to me, it would be so clear and so obvious. I'm like, how do you not know? How do you not see? But I would always say it's logical. I literally always like called it logic, but logic implies other people going to understand it.
Yeah.
Me understanding. So in that moment, I was like, oh my God, that was never logic. It was literally my psychicness that whole time as a kid. And I literally didn't know that's what it was because it's like that word wasn't in my vocabulary.
Right.
So
I
that was
always
like,
say that claircognizance is one of the harder clairs to have because
mhm.
it is logical and it's hard to talk yourself out of like, why do I just know this is going to happen? Or why do I just know
my own voice too, right? So
exactly. That's so interesting. So how did you start to grow the claircognizance so you could really trust it?
yeah, so like at school, like we literally just did so many exercises over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And so just really like experimenting with it so many times, especially in that shorter period of time with so many different people and so many different ways. I just was able to get so clear that like that voice that I always thought was just me making shit up really is actually my psychicness.
That is so cool. I want to go to psychic school and like be
Yeah.
affirmed like that.
Yeah, it was so powerful. So it just took a lot of experimenting, which that's what I always teach all my students. Like, you just got to experiment. You got to keep practicing. Like, that's the way you're going to develop what your version is in a way that's so clear to you that like doubt won't like, get in the way and dismiss it.
Same. That's exactly what I teach too, because it's just so crazy how you can kind of gaslight yourself that something's happening in intuition.
Literally that. Yep.
But when you practice, I mean, I was giving readings to people for I think like 17 years before I actually opened a business. And when my friends were like, you are stopping people in the bank, the grocery store, like you're like interrupting people's dinners and lunches. So like you need to just a private practice. And I was like, but I'm scared. I feel like I'm wrong. They're like, you're not wrong. So
Right. That's amazing. See, I never like did stuff like that because I was always so terrified. I grew up really shy. So just like approaching people like that literally terrified the shit out of me. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing that ever. So I just
but
think it's
after
amazing when people
school,
have that courage.
oh,
What's funny now is that like I don't usually, I have, but I don't very often because one of my, I don't know, maybe like strong suits in this work that I feel like is so different than a lot of other people that I see doing our work is I'm really good with boundaries, like
mm.
psychically, energetically, emotionally. So like sometimes something might try to pop in and I'm like, no, thank you. I'm busy. I'm trying to live my life. It ain't about everybody else today. It's about me today. And so, like I just a lot of times maybe when like my radar starts to go off, if I'm not up for it, I just am like, no, thank you. I'm trying to do my own thing right now. I'm not
And
here for them.
that's really healthy. And I've had to actually learn that lesson through Spirit because I would have to tune them out or I'd be on a date or like something awkward would happen where like someone's loved one would step forward and I was like, can I just enjoy my date? Or like, can I just have a
Mhm.
romantic night for once? But yeah,
Right.
it's
It
true.
would
You
be
kind of
so
have to.
hard. I used to judge myself a lot for that because I'm like, I'm being selfish, I'm this and that. Like, but I was like, no, I'm not going to keep people pleasing. And then I learned, it's been like 2 or 3 years ago when I learned about my incarnation cross for my human design and I'm lefting across of duality. And one of the things from like, the My Human Design app, like Jenna Zoe's version, it literally says like I could best be of service when I just focus on creating what I want and doing how
Mm.
like life and my work how I want to, not how other people want me to. And so that was so affirming. It's like, okay, I've not been like selfish. I've just been in alignment with the
I
way that I'm here to do my healing work.
I
And I
love
love
that. And what's really cool about like us being psychics in this new age is that we have those modalities to kind of validate some of our gifts, like astrology, human design, astrocartography. Like when you look at that stuff and you're like, I always intuited that about myself. And then you're like, oh,
it.
it's in my chart or whatever. That's
Mhm.
what's so cool. Whereas like I feel like witches and psychics like back in the day didn't have that validation. They were like even
Right.
more, I feel like that's even crazier and more brave.
Mhm. Well, because then it can like help cultivate that greater self-acceptance, which is then the thing that helps me feel like I can take action on who I am and the work that I want to do instead of maybe staying stuck in like imposter syndrome or self-doubt. Because I see so many healers because all my clients are healers. I teach healers like all the time. So I like have these conversations a lot and see where they get so stuck in themselves and in those things. And it can be paralyzing for a lot of them.
Yeah, no, totally. I love that you like focus on healers
Mm,
because I feel like we are selfless, but we also like we're judgmental of our own gifts and
yeah.
the people pleasing thing. Like that's something that we connected on. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have to talk about that in the pod. So can you explain, like, is there a theme you've seen in people pleasing, especially in people who are psychics and empaths?
Yes. Any person who like I always describe the word healer as like the desire to be of service. So any person being of service, doesn't matter what it looks like. And so I have seen so many people who are like helpers or healers or psychics or intuitives or people that feel that call to help others feel like that it is literally their mission to put other people before themselves. And
Mhm.
so it's like they're always putting other people's needs before their own no matter what the cost is to themselves. So, like they're in that constant people pleasing space. And then I literally watch how that just drains the life out of them. When I was a teenager and like, living with an uncle and a lot of their friends were healers and psychics and mediums and energy workers. And so I was around those people a lot. And every one of them was always talking about how like drained they felt and how like they've got this person's energy with them and it took them days to recover. And I used to be like, why the hell are y'all doing this work then? Like,
Yeah.
no, thank you. Especially when I always had these healers telling me that's the work I was here to do. And I always told myself, I'm like, once I was finally like, okay, yes, it's the work I'm here to do. because I'm real stubborn, so that took a while. So I didn't know what to do. But eventually I was like, I'm not doing it that way. Like there has to be a better way. And when I learned how to channel, which is like what I learned at Delphi, I was like, okay, I'm going to be of service, not using my own energy, but plugging into that divine source energy and using that. Because then I'm not draining and depleting my own energy. I'm also not like so available for other people's shit to just stick to me. And, that really made a big difference to create a lot more balance, at least in terms of that energetic piece. But even outside of that, like I have some students who, like long after their client is gone, all they're thinking about is like, did I help them? Was it good? Are they like doing their homework? What's happening? When a client leaves, I don't think of you another single time after that.
Oh, yeah, because you're
Because
so present in the moment.
right. Well, that's the thing, right? It's like when you keep your awareness in other people and having all that wondering and considering, literally that is keeping you plugged into them. Right. So you're going to keep sharing and absorbing their energy. It's going to like be draining and depleting you. And so like, it's like they feel like that, like, well, no, I have to, like, because I have to just make sure they like me. I have to make sure they accept me. I have to make sure that it's working. And there's like all this anxious energy in it. And I'm like, you're literally not even in any kind of love right now, or divine love, or in light. Like you're in literally your own wounding that's getting activated right now. And that's why you're like feeling so drained and exhausted, or maybe even
It's such a blessing and a curse. It's like you have these gifts that could help people, but you really want to help. And you're like, oh
right.
my gosh. Yeah. And there's a hypervigilance that comes with being
Yes.
empathetic and psychic that
Yep.
you've had since childhood. It's like taking care of other people and seeing these like subtle shifts. And yeah, that's something that I've noticed too. I back in the early days of my mediumship, where I would just like be so overprotective of sending them my energy and making sure they're good. And it wasn't
Yep.
until I went to an energy healer, and she was like, you never send your energy, you send them to their own source. And I was like, what? Oh, I had all this time I was thinking that I was sending the vibes. She's like, oh, but you're depleting yourself to send them the vibes. I
Yep.
was like, oh shit. And that changed everything for me. And
Right.
now it's funny because like my friends will even say, when I give them readings, I have like amnesia. Does that happen to you where you don't remember?
I literally never remember.
Yeah,
Like I literally, that's how I always know it ain't coming from my own brain. It's coming from spirit.
agreed. Right. So has there ever been anything that like you've said in the moment and then someone's came back and been like, oh my God, that happened? And you're like, I don't remember that happening.
All the time. But like, the recent thing, because girl, I don't know, even when people tell me shit like that, I don't ever remember. But I had this very recent experience. So I have this habit of telling women that they're about to get pregnant, or like knowing when they're pregnant before they know. Like for whatever reason, I've freaking tapped into that.
Love it.
Or like it's really like
Fertility, like fertile
right,
energy. Yeah.
right. And so very recently I had this lady, she like made this post on Instagram. She's a client of mine, and she just had a baby, but she was like making a post about it. And she like had told me, and like she had just texted me about it, but said in the post too, that like whenever she first came to me, I talked to her, I guess, about this little spirit of like a little baby. And it was like felt like a masculine energy, like potentially like a male spirit was like coming in, like really wanted to be her child. Like she wasn't done having kids yet. Like there was still another one to have. And like that happens. Like she just had him. Actually, another one I just thought about, was
Tell
kind of
me.
magical is, so one of my clients in Utah, like not here, I had made a post about mine and my husband's anniversary, which was September 3rd. In the comments on it, she was like, so interesting that the man that told me that I would be having another child happened to get married on the same day that I gave birth to my daughter. So that child, I guess, that I told
Whoa.
her was coming, and it was a little girl, she literally gave birth to her on the exact same day that I got married.
Oh,
I
that's so
didn't know that
special.
then. I literally didn't know that until like Sunday, like a few days.
That's I love it. Like
Right.
divine, I guess, like alignment with that.
And
I know.
I never remember.
No, me neither. The spirit baby to me too is so crazy because people will always reach out afterwards and be like, "You said I was having twins or this and that," and I was like, "I did,"
Right.
but it's fun. This just happened to me too. One of my girlfriend's sisters was pregnant, and then I said, and she was like halfway through her pregnancy, like 6 months or something. And I was like, okay, she's having her baby like February 6th. She's like, that doesn't make sense because that's 4 weeks before her due date. And I was
Right.
like, no, it's happening in the morning. And they're like, okay, whatever. And then February 5th, she calls me and she's like, oh my gosh, my sister's in labor. And I was like, cool. And she's like, no, Steffi, you said the 6th, but it's the 5th. And I was like, I did. I don't know. And then, of course, the labor went into the morning and had the baby 4 weeks early.
Wow.
But it's crazy. Like
Girl, what?
we both are, but it's
Love
kind of fun that we don't have to carry that with us.
that.
We can still deliver the messages, and maybe with our practice and what we do on the
Yep.
inner work we've done, we're able to still do that.
Well, that's why I always like teach all my students, like, don't just focus on using your own psychic abilities. Really focus on connecting to that divine source energy and channeling that, because you're going to have your own psychicness, but spirit is really going to be the one to guide you into like what they're needing, the way they're needing it, without us even having to try to figure that out or manage that. And girl, I'm just always trying to figure out what's the easiest, the quickest way for me to do it.
You're a man, Jen. So
I'm
I
not
get
trying to
it.
work hard. So I'm
No,
like, yeah, it's easier.
No, but honestly, Matt, that's like so beautiful because it takes the pressure off of us as humans. Like we're given the gift. And so we have to let spirit come and be that in between. That's why we're
Yep,
called, that's why we're channelers, we're mediums, we're in between. And we have
literally.
to go up and they have to come down to meet us. And so
Mhm.
that way it takes pressure off of like
Yep,
us and what we're delivering.
yep. I think that like there's this kind of is referencing a little bit something we were talking about earlier, but like with my psychic boundaries, because I do notice that sometimes I think that it's just like almost naturally was already there. Maybe I've cultivated in a previous lifetime, than some others. But like when I learned about like my human design, because every one of my centers are defined except for my root.
No,
So
really?
yeah. So I kind of like feel like that, like because I don't have a lot of openness in terms of open centers,
Mhm.
that like it's like I'm just not even really available. It's not like I'm not constantly taking in energy around me all the time.
That's
So
such an
sometimes I feel
interesting
like
thing.
that there's a connection there too.
And the open root, because to me, you're like so grounded, but maybe it's because of your energy centers just being so consistent.
Right. Right.
Wow, that's crazy.
Mhm.
Oh, and also that ego center defined. I mean, you're like,
And
okay, this is what I'm giving you, and then I'm gone.
I have every gate defined in my ego center too. Every single gate is
Wow.
defined in it.
Okay, you're gate of shock. Same with me. So
Yep. Then I
that's what
got
we're
the
here to do.
initiation. I got the 2551 channel too,
Of
which
course,
I
you have
feel like just
Beta
makes it
Spirit.
even, more digestible for people instead of just
Wow.
like shocking the hell out of them. Like,
Yes. And for those of you that don't know human design, look up your chart. It will change your life. It's just your whole energy. It all makes sense. That's so interesting. Okay, so I wanted to ask you like psychic to psychic, and we kind of talked a little bit about like doubting our gifts. But how
right.
do you handle skeptics and skepticism?
So like it's shifted a lot. Like in the beginning, oh my God, I would be so nervous and anxious, and like even my voice would be shaky because like I still didn't have a lot of confidence myself. So I felt like that I really needed to prove to people, because it's almost like I was making my confidence conditional based, or my acceptance conditional based on their acceptance.
Mhm.
And thankfully, it's been like a 14-year journey at this point where I've actively been working on this. So now like when people are skeptical, it's like it just don't even care, right? Like it's just like, well, that's okay. Like you're allowed to believe what you believe, because I know what I believe, and maybe it's that all that defined will center, but I'm like, I'm right. So I know.
That is the defined ego center for sure.
Right.
Also, it's like the proof is in the pudding. Like there's people that come to you, there's things you've intuited that are, you can't make up.
Right.
Totally. Yeah, I just
Really.
actually the reason I'm asking is I just had a really interesting interview recently. They asked me to like, come on to be interviewed, and they were very skeptical, and I felt like I was being questioned the whole time. And
Right.
normally I take that with like a grain of salt, but for whatever reason I was like, what the heck? Like you called me on and now you're questioning me, and it was just kind of like
Right.
tough because every now and then I feel I have an undefined ego center. So
Okay.
I go in and out of like feeling confident,
Yep.
but it was just such an interesting thing to rethink about like, okay, you know what? I don't have to prove myself to anybody. I understand what I'm doing. I know it's real, but it's just interesting to talk to someone else who like has to deal with that as well.
And like, so as you're sharing, that's something I was thinking about. Like, that's very connected to the people pleasing, because that need to prove myself is such a people pleasing trait, right? Like, I've got to prove myself so these people accept me, so they will like me. And then like sometimes it can even bleed into like managing their emotions, because I can't have them be upset at me because they may want to feel upset too, whether I'm feeling their energy or it's my own upset getting activated. And it's just this like clusterfuck of stuff.
Yeah, people please, like, as a former people pleaser, I still feel like I still go back to that all the time and like try to manage emotions and do they like me and am I doing a good job because I'm on their podcast? And yeah, that's so spot on. How,
Yep.
I don't know, like as a double cancer, like, am I ever gonna get over that?
Woo, girl, I didn't know you had double cancer.
I
Wow.
know, but I mean, would you ever like be doing a reading and someone's skeptical? Would you ever be like, you know what, I'm not doing this? Or would you still,
I
because
would
that would,
say the
yeah.
only way I would do it is if they try to act crazy. Then I'm
Okay.
gonna tell them to fuck off and leave. But if they're just skeptical and they're like, I don't know if I believe you, I'm just gonna keep sharing what Spirit's saying, because I kind of look at it as like there's this metaphor I always use and I always teach all my students that sometimes people come to us and we're just the one to plant the seed. So those are usually the ones where maybe it doesn't seem like it's landing or registering much, or like they're not doing the work. Sometimes they come, the seed's planted, and we're just watering the seed, whether it's just being watered, it's been watered, and it's starting to, bloom a bit. And sometimes they come and it's in full bloom, it's ready for the harvest. And that's really when we see people really doing the work. And there's so much like positive impact and, the work that we're helping them do. And so I like create that all of those have the same value, whether I'm
Mm.
planting the seed, watering the seed, or helping them harvest the seed. One is not better than the other. So maybe it's someone skeptical, like on my path, and they're aligning with me, and I'm just there to plant that seed. And so it may not register or land for them then, and it might later, but I may never see that it does. So, and maybe it's like confidence piece and all those defined centers and all that. But I just know like you getting what you need, whether you know it or not, I know it.
Oh, that's such a beautiful way and perspective of looking at it, the planting the
Yeah.
seed. Because I will say, like, there's rarely a skeptic that will come to me and not at the end, I see some sort of transformation,
Yeah.
even if like they're not admitting it to me, right? Like I know 6 months down the line, I hope that there's something that like awareness that happens within them. But it's still hard in that moment not to gaslight yourself and be like, am I making this up? And like, have you ever had this happen where you try to read someone and you absolutely can't? Like there's a black wall?
I've never happened where I couldn't, but I've had it happen quite a few times where it is so much harder, where it's almost like I have to work harder to get in. Because some people, they come in and they are so freaking open that it's like shit just starts flooding in
Yes.
immediately, right?
Yes.
And it's just like, and it's like just so, it's fun when it's like that, right? Because,
Oh,
I
yes.
work hard. But when they come in and they're so like closed off stone wall, like I just will like, because again, it's this thing of like, you're not gonna tell me I can't. So I will literally keep drilling through that wall. Or a lot of times what I do, like I'm gonna drill through it. I'm like, I'm finding a back door around. I'm gonna
Mm.
find another way around to get through to you. So sometimes I might like literally do something else or try to crack a joke or like be stupid or silly in some type of way or have some kind of human moment or ask them some questions, things like that to kind of start to like drop their wall a bit, especially if when they're coming in and I'm like walking them back to my office and I feel that already.
Mhm.
Usually, like I'll just kind of make that human connection first and kind of talk to them, shoot the shit a bit, and that helps them
Totally.
settle in a bit, And sometimes then it's like that wall's more permeable.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
honestly such good advice for any psychic that feels like they are up against a skeptic, or there
Mm.
are just like you said, like we're both humans here. We're both talking to each other, and the vulnerability can kind of could drop a little bit when you're
Yep.
just saying like, hey, listen, like be
Right.
open or whatever happens, happens. And then you can see like they start to soften for sure.
Exactly. And I also got the 2034 channel, the channel of charisma. So I feel like that also helps too, right? That like I always feel like I can get away with a lot of shit
That's
when it comes to
beautiful.
right.
Cause like I feel like I buckle under the pressure sometimes. Like I get so nervous. I mean, I've gotten a lot better
Right.
also because too, like when I am fully channeling and I say something and they're like, that doesn't resonate. And I'm like, okay. And I just like bulldoze through. And then 6 months later to a year later, they email or text me and they're like, yo, that was right. I just
Mhm.
didn't hear it. Or I asked a family member and I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. So now
Yep.
I'm learning like, okay, listen, I know what I'm saying is true. I just have to, it might not resonate with them because spirits, people get it's like spirit amnesia when they're getting readings. Like they don't
Yeah.
remember things.
I know. I was telling my clients like record it on your phone.
Uh-huh.
Like you don't
Uh-huh.
need to remember. You're not going to remember. You can go back and listen to it later. Turn on your phone recording.
Yeah. And sometimes too, when I'm getting reading from psychics, they'll say like a name of a family member and I'll be like, I don't know, but I know it's true, but I don't know. And then I'll ask a family member and they're like, oh yeah, that was my
Mhm.
aunt's sister or whatever.
Right.
So that's
Cool.
crazy. The only time I had this really crazy thing where I couldn't read someone, it was like early in my mediumship, like my private practice, and
Mm.
someone sent me their palm to read. Like I was doing like digital palm readings, which like
Oh.
doesn't really work out. Someone sent me their palm and I literally sent back, I can't read your palm. I'm so sorry. And they were like, what do you mean? And I just felt a black wall come up, protection, something. And I
Yep.
felt awful saying this to someone. And I was like, I really can't. And my friend had referred him. So I felt really bad. I said to her, like, hey, listen, I can't. And just a week ago, that person was like committed, he committed a crime, but he's been accused of actually like sexual assaults,
Wow.
but just recently.
Oh, girl, that gives me
I
chills.
know, but that was the only time I've been like, I can't read for you. And I felt like a dick in the moment, but now I'm like, oh my
What if
gosh, well,
spirit was
actually,
protecting
you are
you
the
and
dick and
protecting
you're
them?
awful. It was
Right.
evil.
Right. So what if spirit was protecting you?
I kind of
Like,
felt that
I'm
way.
like, no, girl, don't even plug into that energy.
Yeah, totally. Do you find that people have like misconceptions of psychics? Like they're like, don't tell me when I'm going to die, or they're like really
I
scared.
cannot tell you. Like sometimes people are like, I don't know, I don't want to like you to tell me that. Like so often. And I'm like, I'm here to use this as the help way to help you heal. I'm not trying to predict your future or any of that shit. When people start asking me questions like that, I'm like, no, I'm bored. This is now I don't want it. Like, no, we're not doing that.
Do you find you have like, because I think everyone has variations of different gifts. So what
Mhm.
would you say is like your strong? I mean, you said the fertility thing, but are there like strong gifts you feel like you have?
You know, I like, and this is something that was never like intentional at first, but it's what I've noticed. I tend to see so much about people's purpose, like the way they're here to do it, what it is, like how they can get into alignment with it. And like all my clients, are healers, which was never originally a thing that I was like, I'm going to be a healer for healers. It's literally just the way it happened. Which one of my teachers at Delphi had told me that when I was in school, but I
Because
never
they're
listened
all like,
to her. So, bro, I just let that go out in my mind.
yeah, totally. I feel like I've seen my gifts even evolve just from straight mediumship to like medical mediumship or like
Mm,
purpose or pregnancy, things like that. When
right.
again, like what I need in my life, I like kind of reflect it sometimes. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
So it's interesting. But
That
what's funny is like I'll go on interviews and people will be like, "What's going to happen in 2027?" Like prophetic. And some people are really good. Do you have any like foresight in your gifts?
So I sometimes, when I'm channeling for people, will see, future things, which I always give the disclaimer. Future things are just possibilities based, on kind of on where you're heading in life, the decisions you're making. You can always alter those possibilities depending on the choices you're making. Because I
Mhm.
always want to keep the accountability on them, right? And so also so they know like the power that they have. But if people ever ask me to try to predict their future, I like what I always say is no, I'm not here to predict your future. And then I give that little spiel, and then I will say, but I'm happy to look and see what possibility spirit's showing us.
Oh, that's great verbiage.
Mhm. So
You
then
could
I'll
be a
do it that
psychic
way.
lawyer.
Right. But if people, right, I totally could. There's that Gemini energy.
Yeah.
But like if they ever ask me, like for instance, like what you just said, could you tell me like what's gonna happen in 2027? I will be like, I don't know. That's not how it works.
Yeah, Totally. It's funny because
It's not for me today.
I'm not really good at prophetic stuff. I mean, I definitely have channeled for people like again pregnancies or like you're about to move or meet someone, and
Yeah, no.
I love when that happens. But as far as like every now and then I'll get collective hits on what the
Dude.
meaning of like this time is, but not necessarily like this earthquake or this tornado or this thing will happen.
Right, right. I'm like, I'm for whatever reason, I ain't tapped into that shit, and I'm okay with that.
I
Because like,
agree too. I mean, it would be cool to
how people
know.
feel. What's that gonna help me with?
I know. Every now and then I get a troll being like, well, then why don't you win the lottery if you're a psychic? I'm like, that's not how it freaking works, bro.
Right. Literally. So like crazy that people like come for you like that. I think
Oh my
that
god.
happens also a lot more people know about you than they do me. So that's probably
Oh, your time will come. Don't worry.
right, right. At least like online anyway, like locally, like a lot of people know. But yeah, like I don't know. So my emotion center, is defined, and I'm an emotional person. I don't do well with things like that. I don't do good at debating because I'm too emotional. I will tell you to fuck off like
Yeah.
so fast. I'll be like, "You love who?" Uh,
Yeah. That's a
and
good
so,
quality to have. But like, yeah, it's difficult. I have emotional center too, so I try
right.
to like process the emotions before I like
Mhm.
dart back with my Aries moon. But it's gotten easier and also harder because there's more eyes and more people that are like scrutinizing my work. But at the same time, I'm like stupid questions like that, like why aren't you winning the lottery? And it's like, first of all, I do okay in the lottery. Like I have done
Okay,
I've done well. Not,
actually.
but I don't sit in a freaking mansion,
Right.
but also like our gifts are meant to be used ethically. So when spirit channels to us, I'd like to think that you and I are both doing it in the highest good of
Yeah.
ourselves and others.
Exactly. Something I just thought about, like, if someone were to ask me that question, how might I respond? And like, because my husband and I have talked about this before, like trying to manifest winning the lottery and things like that. So, like I will always tell him that, like, well, guess what? We're not the only ones trying to manifest that. So we're
Ah.
getting ourselves in line also with the other people who already been working on that. So, like, if someone asks me that may say, "Well, I'm working on it, but it ain't been my turn yet." Sit
That's
back and eat your popcorn and watch the show.
yeah, that's actually
One of the
really good.
kids, unsubscribe, whatever.
And there's other manifestations that are more specific to you.
Yeah.
I forgot what psychic said this, but and I have used this to retort back at people. Gosh, I can't remember who the psychic was, but she said when someone said like, "Well, why aren't you winning the lottery or why aren't you like a millionaire or whatever?" And she's like, "Do you think surgeons perform on themselves? Like I can't get the message for myself." And I was like, "That is brilliant."
Yep. That's a good analogy. I always tell people we are our best blind spots. So, like, I can see other people so clearly, but when I look at myself, that filter is not as clear
I
because there's still a
know.
lot of shit I'm working on. I'm still working on clearing that filter up.
And totally. And karmically, there's reasons why we have lessons we need to go through in this incarnation too that we're not supposed to
Yep.
know.
Exactly. And my goal
So,
is to be okay with that.
oh my God, it's so good to just shoot the shit with another
I
psychic.
know. I like to sit here. I'm like, girl, I feel like I could just talk to you all day long.
I know. Same, same. There's something in your website that I wanted to talk about. Energy processing is something you
Yeah.
do. Would you
Yeah.
mind like explaining what that
Yeah.
is?
So I always like tell people that's my like version because it's like something I created, but it's my version of like a blend of coaching, counseling, and channeling.
Cool.
So like the purpose of it is about processing through energy to try to get to what the root cause is.
Mm,
How it all started, 'cause this is kind of a fun story. So this was maybe like 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And I like was at a plant medicine ceremony, and it was like the next morning because like it's like overnight, and the next morning everyone wakes up and then does integration, all that. Before we had started integration, one of my friends came and got me and was like, "Hey, this person over here, it has a really bad headache. Can you come over and do some energy work on her?" So I was like, "Sure." So I was over there and like I was just like working on her the way I normally would when I do energy work.
hmm
And I literally heard spirit say, like, ask her this question. So I said, okay. So because like I like spirit, I don't know where the hell you're going with this, but trust at this point. So I asked her and she answered the question. So then Spirit was like, okay, now ask this question. So I was like, okay. So I asked a question. And then literally, I eventually, as I was observing what Spirit was doing, I realized Spirit was like literally processing her through the layers of her headache to see what it was a manifestation of in her physical body. And literally, like when she got to the root, and of course, I'm channeling energy like the whole time into her head and into her sacral, because that's also where spirit said to channel energy into. And literally, when she got to the root of it, all of a sudden she was like, my headache is gone all of a sudden.
Oh,
And in that moment, I don't get chills, I'm telling the story. And in that moment, I was like, what just happened? What just happened? And then it happened several more times in plant medicine ceremonies. And then like every once in a while, it would like happen. And then eventually it's like it happened enough where I was observing it. It's like Spirit was teaching me like a class I was taking, where I was
wow.
like, okay, now I know how to recreate that. And so then like I started like practicing just like the recreation, like we're so intentional on people. And then I was like, all right, I got enough now to make that an offering. You want to know what's
Cool.
really interesting? So, like, so often the root core place that so many people go, like in their wounds, is fear of dying.
Yeah.
Like, like literally, it'll be like, I don't know, some, I wish I could think of like some on the top of my head right now, but some repetitive wound or thing they keep struggling with. So we're processing through the layers. Maybe it's like, well, if I don't do that, then I'm going to stay depressed. Okay, well, like, what are you afraid is going to happen if you stay depressed? And then maybe it's like, well, I'm just going to lay in bed all day and I'm never going to do anything. And so then I'll keep asking about that. And then, like, well, life would just be meaningless and not worth living. And so then I'll ask about that. And I was like, well, I probably would just die. Like, so often people
The
get there
root.
when
Yep.
like the surface literally seems like it was not even adjacent to that or in that neighborhood.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, people will go deeper to where they're afraid of what's going to happen to everyone else when they die. And that's very common for people pleasers too, because all
Yes.
they're thinking about is what about everybody else's feelings.
Hmm.
It's
Fear
very
of
interesting.
fear of death is very real. And I mean, even though I had talked to people on the other side and I know our energy just transfers over, like there are
Yeah.
times in my life, maybe even earlier when I wasn't really sure what mediumship was, where I was terrified of every single scenario, almost like a hypochondriac. And I was
Yeah.
wondering if maybe I was picking up on how people died or if I was really scared. But I remembered watching in the 90s Oprah, like,
Okay.
okay, so this is what makes me feel very relatable, or Oprah's relatable because she is.
Mhm.
So she surveyed her audience and said, what is like what's the biggest fear of everybody? And the number one fear was spiders. And the
Interesting.
number two fear was fear of dying. And
Wow.
Oprah was like, that blows my mind because I think dying is the scariest thing ever. And there was this open conversation on the show. And that
Wow.
kind of sparked me like, oh my gosh, is everyone, I mean, she's just so like Aquarian energy. I mean, she's great. But that's so interesting that in the back of all of our minds, that is something we think about, like the
Yeah.
mortality.
It's like in that like core layer. It's like that's what's happening. And so I've even had people, because sometimes people come in, it's an emotional thing. It's maybe like why a relationship's not working out. Why can't I keep a job? Sometimes it's like, what's this cancer in my body trying to tell me? So like in any of those scenarios, like we'll process through it. I love doing energy processing because I just love getting used, that throat chakra space and helping people. I'm a 5-1. So helping people just figure stuff out and seeing what's happening and understanding it. And then from there we'll come up with a solution. Usually like my way oftentimes is okay, let's identify the limiting beliefs. Let's create some empowering beliefs so that you can start to work to recondition your brain and putting out like new and different energy. So you start to like shift that alignment that keeps happening. So now you're aligning with new patterns or new cycles or new types of people.
And it is so multifaceted when you take back the layers like that and you really kind of uncover
Yeah.
psychologically why that fear might be. And it's like so much deeper, but that's why you need someone like you to help you kind of work through that, or doing shadow work or inner child work or journaling. Like that's why I'm such a big like cheerleader of doing that work, because all of your behaviors or thoughts or obsessive thoughts or intrusive thoughts like do come from a wounded place.
Yeah, and so much of it is so unconscious. It's like all these systems always running, and we don't even recognize that they're running. But it's like part of us knows that they're running, but we also like don't notice it because it's so familiar and it's such a norm. And it's just like it can be so confusing for people.
And it's exhausting to be human. That's why it's like on the other side, it's so funny when I channel, people are like, "Oh, I'm doing great. Like I'm
Right. It's like I
fantastic."
love where I'm at.
Yeah. And that's the thing
That's
I
what they'll
try to
say.
tell the loved ones who are feeling anxious or grieving or whatever. I'm like, listen, I hate to say this because they miss you, but they don't want to come back into their body. They're in bliss.
Yeah.
And living as a human being, like we're in school.
Mhm.
This is the hard part. Dying is the easy
Really
part.
is. Right. I have a question about that, like your experience. Have you
Yeah.
ever had it like when you're doing mediumship where someone's, trying to connect to a loved one and it's like literally their spirit is not there, and then you realize it's because they've already come back, they've already been reborn?
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy because Matt, I literally thought about this morning because there was a client
Okay.
specifically that was asking why their dad wasn't there. And they were like, I want to talk to my dad. And I was like, the dad was not showing up again
Mhm.
and again. And usually spirit steps forward like pretty easy if I call
Right.
upon them. And I was like, you're about to be, or do you have a son or whatever? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, it's your dad.
Mhm.
So yeah, that has happened. But
Mhm.
time isn't linear. So there are some times where I do feel like a soul can reincarnate and then a soul can also be it's like, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
different levels of your soul can exist in different realms.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like it's such a layered question because I don't really know.
Mhm.
But in this instance, like I definitely felt like and she was also like pregnant with another one. And I was like, no, the dad is already there. It was like it was just very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that happen a few times lately because like mediumship isn't my specialty. So if I'm giving a reading to someone and a spirit pops up, we'll go into it. But if
Mhm.
people like come to me and they're like, I want to have a reading so that I can connect with the other side, I always say, no, I'll refer you to someone else.
Yeah.
Mostly because it's just not my specialty. It's not like it doesn't light me up in the same way. And so like I had that happen really recently and I told her, I was like, it feels like, oh, this is what happened. She had a baby that was like stillbirth,
Mm.
and she was like trying, and then she'd had I think three more kids since then, and she was trying to figure out the spirit of that baby, because obviously she never got to experience that baby, and spirit immediately is like, nope, spirit isn't available, like the spirit's already been reborn. And then I was like, okay, because it doesn't always mean that we reborn to them, right?
Yes.
The spirit told me I was reborn to her as a little boy, which she said her newest child was a son, like was her own boy. And then she
Yes.
told me that another psychic had told her that before.
I love when like there's several psychics that pick up on that. That
Mhm.
happens too. Like someone already told me that. I'm like, great. If two psychics are telling you that, it's real.
Right. Like you like need to be really letting that message in.
Oh, yeah. And I hope that gives people comfort that, and even if their loved ones, are not reincarnated or incarnated, whatever, they're with you at all times and they're guides and they're in your soulmate group and they're always going to be there. And I think that should be reassuring to people,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is great. Are you picking up I don't know. Do you ever have like collective themes that you keep seeing over and over again, like that people come to you for? Are there anything right now that you're seeing or
Sometimes
feeling?
like I have had it happen sometimes where I feel like that whole week or for a few weeks, I'm having the same damn conversation with people over and over and over and over and over. I've not had that happen lately, but I have had it happen in different periods over the years.
Hmm.
And like, I don't know like why. Maybe when those moments are happening, there is like something more collective thing happening where
Yes.
it's bringing a lot of those things up to the surface for people. I actually never thought about it in that way, but
It's
I feel like
interesting.
so
Now
now,
you'll notice it. Like, oh my gosh. Cause this week, I've been having like, I'm back to readings again because I took a little
mhm,
hiatus. And it's almost like spirit gives me a little break with some of the same themes. But this
mhm.
past week, every single person who saw me, their birthday was in the same week. Every single one of them
Whoa,
had a birthday
that's
within
trippy.
7 days. But they were all one woman was 74, one was 25. So it ranged from
Wow,
that. And they all had this. And I was like, why is everyone with this birthday? They're all Libras. I'm like, I mean, maybe their birthday's coming up, but still, I was like, no,
right.
but that happens all the freaking
That's
time where
so
people come to me
trippy.
and they had similar themes in their
Yeah,
charts and coming up. So
wow,
anyway, I'm curious if that happened to you
that's
too.
neat.
Something that I'm also feeling like, and again, I don't do prophetic things, but there's
Mm,
something I've been channeling recently. And I don't know if you feel any hits on this, that our generation or the generation, maybe Generation Alpha and Gen Zs,
yeah,
are going to start phasing off of online and especially their kids, because I'm seeing really interesting things where parents are either exploiting their kids on a social
right.
media. But I have a feeling that there's going to be more laws in place that actually um like constrict us from posting children online.
I mean, I could see that as a possibility. Something comes to mind when you say that is I've seen, and this is maybe in the past 2 years, like this, I don't need, like, it's not even anyone I know, but it's like I've seen online or I've heard people talk about, like, maybe a younger person they know, where like they're not getting smartphones, but they're getting like just little flip phones because it's not giving
Interesting.
them the same access to always be so plugged in. I
Uh-huh.
thought that was so interesting that there's like these younger people being born and like that's just automatically where they're at, where it's their own choice. So like, no, I don't want to be as like constantly plugged in, like online. I maybe want to be more present. Like,
Uh-huh. It's like the
oh,
regression of that, of being
yeah,
so plugged in.
yeah,
Yeah, it feels to me like this generation, the Pluto and Aquarius that are about to be born, there
right,
is something about like wanting autonomy of their choices and what they put online. And so it's tough because the generation that, we're all raised in of like, or millennials at least, where it's like, okay, let's put everything online. They're going to be
right.
like, I didn't have a choice or I didn't want to be put online. But I keep on feeling and hearing that that's going to be like a big movement in the next like 5 to 6 years.
I could definitely see that because it's like, like our generation has kind of really had to like shine the light on everything and bring so much more awareness and get it so much out into the world, which I feel like is what the online thing, like kind of thing has really done. And, like one thing I always tell my clients is sometimes to know what balance looks like, we have to go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other end. So our brain can even conceive of then what the middle is.
Yeah.
And so maybe, like our generation kind of swung from the opposite end all the way to this other end. And now those younger ones, like that you were talking about, like being born now, maybe they're going to be the ones helping us figure out what the middle or the balance looks like.
Totally. And that's what I love about seeing all these like new generations and the old ones like all learning and also seeing it like in congruence with the astrology.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would be really cool, like to
Is
be able to watch that.
I know. Ooh, cool. Well, this is like flown by.
Right. I know. I was just looking at my how's it already been almost an hour. Wow.
How can people work with you and
Yeah.
like see all you have so many beautiful offerings because you are a manifesting generator.
Exactly.
So tell me like what's something you're excited about. I know you do retreats too. Tell me everything.
Okay, so always the best way to find out about all my things is on my website, belovehealings.com. It's just the name of my healing practice, so belovehealings.com. And then, I do have some retreats coming up. I have 2 retreats planned for 2024. One is a healers retreat, which is an annual retreat that I do for with my students. So to go on that retreat, you have to have taken my channeling workshop, at least like the level 1 of that to be eligible for it. Which is possible to do online, for people that aren't in Kansas City that want to do that. So if anyone's interested in that, but like that retreat is going to be in Belize in February of 2024.
Fun. I
Um,
want to go.
right, yeah, girl, come on. And it's on this place called Turtle Island, and so it's just this little private tropical island in Belize. And then October of 2024, I'm doing another one in Belize. It's more jungle vibe, but it's not a healer's retreat. It's called the Own Your Power Retreat. This one you won't see on my website yet because it's so far out. I've been focusing on my other things that are more immediate right now. Like the page is being built, it's just not published yet. But if people
You're just
don't,
kind of like, alluding to the
yeah,
exciting jungle
planting a
vibes.
seed. And then, like my probably the thing that I enjoy most of like all my offerings is the Own Your Power work that I do. And so it's a thing that I created, like, well, really Spirit and I created because I channeled it a few years ago. And like, so it addresses kind of the people pleasing because like I had this moment one day. Can I tell a story real fast about it?
Yeah, of course.
So this was like, I think 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I had a client. This was a new client. Like, and every once in a while, I have people do this where they'll come and see me one time, and then they literally over a few months do every single offering I have. Right, like you probably know what that's
Yes,
like. And
yeah.
so she was one of those people. And she would like tell me, like, 'cause she was, I think, like in her 50s, maybe 40s, something like that. But she would tell me she's been on her healing path for a long time and been on like retreats with people like Deepak Chopra and stuff like that. And she's like, no one talks about healing in the way you do. You just make it so simple to understand. And she's
Oh.
like, I've heard so many different people. And I was like, thank you. I mean, I think that and believe that, but it's nice to hear someone who's experienced so many other people say that. And
Mm-hmm.
she was just always like so like lit up and like such a biggest fan kind of energy for like a short
Oh,
period of time, you know.
uh-huh.
But she one day she was like, come over to my house. It was more like come over to my mansion. She's like, come over to my house and let's talk. She's like, I just feel like I could like help you with some things. I was like, okay. I don't know what I don't know, girl. I'm down. And so I went over and we had like talked for a bit, and then she was like, what's like the thing you want most for the world? She's like, kind of like your legacy, like just that thing you really want for the world. And I like said a few obvious things about being love and like teaching people how to heal themselves, like stuff that like, you know, was kind of part of my messaging already. And she straight up looked at me. She's like, I mean, that sounds good, but I feel like there's something else. And I was
Oh,
like, okay, I'm like having someone do to me what I
I'm
do to
about to
others.
say, yeah, the
I
psychic
loved
tables
it.
returned.
Right. I always like will say, get me, do me, get me.
I'm the
Yes.
same. I'm the same.
Right. And so then like I was like, all right, like let me just kind of close my eyes, like we're sitting on our couch, like let me go within and let me just feel into that. Right. And then I was doing that and I was talking to Spirit about it. And all of a sudden I was like, I just want everyone to know how powerful they are. Like literally, like I just want that for the world. And then Spirit showed me how like all these things that we all want for the world, like world peace and all this other shit, that's how it's going to happen is by everyone being connected to their power. And then we're also shifting in this new paradigm where we're coming out of how people have always abused their power. Right. So then this is about really creating a new relationship with power where it's about like that creative, like life force energy, as opposed to harming people and having control over them.
Yeah.
So I opened my eyes, I told her that. I got chills as I said it out loud. She got full body chills. And I was like, that's. And then I'm a how person. I mean, I'm, you know, Gemini, but it's in 10th house. So like I'm very much like, I need to know how, like it's gotta be practical. Like, what is it? And I didn't know. And then so I just talked, that was like a February of that year. So I kept talking to Spirit about it, and Spirit like would talk to me about different things and started teaching me about power wounds, which I'm like, what is a power wound? Never heard that. And so people pleasing is one of the power wounds, but like self-sacrifice, codependency, people pleasing, hyper responsibility, imposter syndrome. There's a bunch of others. So then like I just wrote those on a list. And then one day I was like, Spirit, all right, like how do I define power? Spirit helps me with that. So I like wrote that down. And then I was like, well, I still don't know that I'm clear how to help people own their power. Cause like I don't want to just tell people, go own your power. Like I need to know practical steps. What does it look like? So that it's like accessible. And then it was one day, it was September of that year, because I was always creating that intention. I like literally walked into my office. I didn't have like a first client that morning, like right off like I normally would. I sit at my desk, I open my computer, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just saw the whole thing. So I typed it all out and got it out of me. And then I was like, all right, now here's this offering, this program, which I'd never really had a program before, that people can do. And like I just love it so much. Like I have so much fun like helping people really like transform their relationship with their power in a way that's like practical and accessible. And it like I love it. It's so fun.
That's amazing. I love when Spirit channels what you're supposed to do next.
Ah,
And that's kind of like with this podcast. I always say it's spirit led, and that's how I got to you. Actually, I don't even know how we originally like met up.
well,
Like,
I've been following you for a while. When I heard you on the talking about astrocartography on the Day Luna podcast,
oh,
I just like I was like vibing with your energy, like even like the tone of your voice, I really loved kind of that rasp that you have. And you're talking about astrocartography, which I'd heard about, but you talked about it in such this like easy to understand way. Literally, girl, like I
you're
was in
so
for
sweet.
listening to the podcast that I was like, no, I need to be taking notes. So I stopped it. And then like a week later, I finally was like, I need to listen to that and take notes. So I have this whole like all these notes from that episode of all the
You
things you were
are a
talking
Gemini.
about. Right.
I need to learn more about this.
Right.
Yeah, but just so people understand like how this happened. Yeah, it was like you followed me and then I followed you. It was just this weird like love energy. And then
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, then you took the astrocartography course and the
Yeah.
rest is history.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just
It's
so
resonant.
grateful Spirit led us to one another. You're very special as a human being. And I just can't wait for people to discover you too. So thank you for being here. And
Yeah.
thanks for all the gifts you give to the world about
It's
power
so
and
much
people
fun.
pleasing.
Like I literally just have so much fun.
Oh, yes, that's what we need, more fun. Okay. Well, and everyone knows where to find me, spiritsis.com, on Instagram, spirit_sis, or TikTok, Spirit Sis. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Right?